Come on, I couldn't help but take a dip in the clear square window. But there was no time to blame the crazy gaming system. Lady, are you alright? Vinter called out for me. After no reply, I answered powerlessly, there is devil over here too. Wait a moment, I'm about to say Vinter. No thanks, I said grimly, staring at the black lumps crawling along the cave wall behind the square window. I think I can handle it. The no way that the system window would open in case of an emergency caught the person. Accept the quest fast system. Use your magic to the devil. Magic order fire Pison prison start 0/20. A black lump jumped over the wall. A huge mouth with a sharp tooth came to me through a square fire piston. I shouted incontrovertibly, then the approaching mass of leaves suddenly burst into a tremendous fire. I stepped back from the heat. The devil burning in the fire is screaming. The devil wriggled and soon drooped. The fire brightened the view. The moment I faced exactly what was happening in the cave, I got goosebumps. Dozens of slippery lizards-like monsters crawling towards me. Crawl. Then again, one jumped up to catch me. Prison. This time the devil frozen in the air. The ice-capped devil descended to the bottom of the cave. It shattered in all directions. 2 out of 20. The number in the air rose in a flash. I was bewildered by a magical century more powerful than I thought. What is it? It's incredible. I was staring at the bodies of charred mountain-scattered demons with a puzzled look. They roared as if they were angry at the death of their colleagues. I stared at them at the sound and made a solemn move. It's all set. From then on I shouted the spell in a trance. Compared to the last brown bear, the difficulty felt much easier. This is because the speed of the lizard mana was not fast. Fire Pison prison. The little annoying thing was that we had to constantly shout out strange spells. It's rather fortunate that they ripped and torn. If I had to recite this shabby spell before they die, I would have died in shame. 15 out of 20. Before I knew it, I had almost finished the devil fire Pison. Fire Pison. I've been crawling in a rather insincere way. Burn 2 at once. 17 out of 20. The burning wriggles were disgusting. I vibrated in the cave passage. I frowned with my nose closed. It was stronger and cleaner to freeze for killing, but then the cave quickly fell into darkness. Therefore we had to light the interior by regularly lighting fires. Fire Pison prison. 19 out of 20. I then removed the 2 leftovers from the ceiling of the cave. There is only 1 left now. I was so nervous while dealing with the devil that I was finally able to relax. I haven't even seen Roan's hair yet, but I already felt exhausted. While I was waiting for the last devil to come, I suddenly felt something strange. What is it? Where is it? The last one didn't show up. I scoured the passage because these devilishly cling to 1,000 pages and crawl. By the way, no matter how hard I looked, it was only a dead body that had already been magically killed. Did he run away? I tilted my head and checked the air again. 19 out of 20. The counted numbers remained. My heart was on edge because the quest wouldn't end unless I killed the last one. I can't do this. I must find it first. I reluctantly moved into the cave. It was the door when I was sticking to the wall that had been tangent to the west, empty space and spouting only the spells because I didn't want to touch the disgusting monsters. It was when I carefully moved a few steps away from the remains of the devils on the floor. Thud. The cave shake suddenly. What is it? I hesitated. The shakes soon disappeared. It was when I took another step, wondering if I felt it wrong this time. It's more certain than before. I felt the frost. When I stopped altogether, the fire, which was burning with mana firewood, was fading away so the light could not reach far away. I stared at the other side of the aisle, holding my breath. It was the moment. I can't compare it to anything. I feel it in a row, and I reflexively raised my hand to plug my ears. The intensity of the tremor grew bigger and closer. Fire Pison. I shouted the spell reflexively. Feeling something was wrong, flames rose over the far side of the cave. His mouth slowly opened at the sight that was immediately revealed. A big demon, huge enough to fill the passage, was rushing toward me with a fireball hanging over one head. Boom! Every time he struggled, the cave shook like it was falling apart. The stone dust fell over my head. It brought me to my senses, and I shouted the hysterical spells. Fire Pison prison, but he only faltered for a moment, not killed himself. It's so huge that it doesn't hit hard. It overlaps with the situation of hunting the brown bear. Fire Pison prison. I recoiled and kept shouting for orders. But the monster, let alone die, rather jumped with more excitement as the distance narrowed down. The fear struck suddenly. I was stuck back, but I couldn't move any further because I was blocked by something hard. It will be at the end of the passage. Behind me is the cave wall, and in front of me a giant monster with no magic. The devil, who was 1 inch ahead, opened his mouth wide to swallow me up. "I'm being eaten," someone awakened me roughly with the terrible sound of cutting through the flesh. With a familiar voice I opened my eyes wide. There was an eerie rush. Someone was blocking my way with a knife in the mouth of a monster. A brilliant golden head twinkled in the dark. "Your Grace, I can't believe it." I looked at him blankly, and my voice, the Crown Prince, who was standing in the mouth of the monster, shouted ferociously, "What's the use of standing idly still? Do you want to die? Hurry up, use the magic inside the muzzle." He came to his senses at his words and quickly opened his mouth quickly. Fire, prison inside the mouth of the open demon. The spell poured down. Surely there was a blow to those who were directly attacked inside, and the devil shook like mad. Callisto was pushed to my side. All I could do for him was keep on chanting the spells: fire, prison, fire, prison, fire, prison. I continued to shout the spell of the spell without breathing. 20 out of 20. And finally the last devil drooped, spewing great smoke from the main dome. At the same time with the system window we're going to have, the identity was revealed. System: defeating the devil's quest completed, plus 5% favorability of Callisto as a reward. The sudden quest is over. The disappearance of the square window completely relieved all tension. I stumbled and leaned against the wall. "Princess," the Crown Prince opened his eyes wide and came to me at once. "What's wrong? Where did you get hurt?" The Crown Prince frowned ferociously and scoured me to see if I was hurt. Reddish arc sensitivity gauge bar that flickers slowly, and looking alternately at the dead lizard stuck in his bayonet, I felt strange. I'd almost die if cut it short. The moment of desperation when the magic didn't work, and my heart sank. I didn't know how to describe this feeling that I had felt since I saw the golden hair that suddenly appeared. He was such a terrible guy. His red eyes looked very strange, as if he were worried about me. "Why aren't you talking? Where did you get hurt? Did you get a slap in the mouth?" As I stared at him in silence, he bent down and thrust me into the face. "What are you doing?" I shuddered out of him and held fast to the beating heart, and clasped close to the wall with a bang. "I'm fine, Your Highness." No one got hurt. At that moment a blood smell flashed through my nose. When I looked up and looked at the Crown Prince, I could see that one of his sleeves was tattered. A dark red liquid leaked out from there. "Your Highness is hurt," I exclaimed in astonishment. When the Crown Prince noticed where I was looking, he picked up where he was hurt and pretended to be strong. "Not a big deal, it's just a little scratch." "Not a big deal, sit here and stay." I walked past him and toward the dead devil. Because he ran straight to me, the Crown Prince's sword was still in the devil. A shaft with its muzzle open as it stands. The drooping corpses of the devil were abhorrent. I pulled the Crown Prince's sword out of the muzzle of a charmed beast by the attack magic I spell. And with it the ends of the skirt were well rounded and left long. The prince looked at me with a strange look on his face as I turned around with a sword and a cut cloth. "Here you go, and give me your arm." I held out a sword to him. At my request he took the sword gently, put it in the sword, and extended his injured arm. I threw a torn skirt over the wound. I copied the billion one I saw in the book to stop the bleeding, but it wasn't as pretty as I thought. "You're good at magic, can't you do healing magic?" He's staring at me like that, and Crown Prince asked suddenly. There was nothing to hide, so I answered immediately. "Yes, that's a mess. Shall we do it again? Can't you even joke around? Why are you so cold?" With another earful of his babbling, I wrapped up a sloppy rod, put down the hem of the sky-colored cloth quickly with serious eyes. "It was when I was watching everything. You don't have to make that face. It's better when you apply this." Part of the emotion that was being pressed down on the calm voice that came from the other side of the head leaked out. "What kind of potion are your saliva, Your Highness? Now you've decided to blaspheme the imperial family." The prince smiled as if he was having fun at me, and then he wiped his face and asked, "Well, what the hell were you doing here?" Without even asking for inventory, I was speechless for a moment, saying, "These days around the Archina Islands is very dangerous." "And you tried to kill the demons by yourself without escort? What if this isn't the end?" I thought about this last time when I was hunting bears. As expected, princesses are not usually mad dogs. I felt very unfair. "You think I want to do this?" I was so frustrated that I felt like I was going to die. But I couldn't say that the system made me do it. Looking at me who had no answer, the Crown Prince opened his eyes slightly. "You're not satisfied with the archaeological data I gave you last time, so you're going to go all the way here? Did you come in person? I didn't know you was such an inquisitive woman." "No, it's not like that." "Well, We came here to do volunteer work, and the sane kid been kidnapped by remnants of Layla's new country. I had no choice but to summarize the facts in moderation as to how far to explain them to him. I've come all the way here to save him. Volunteer activity. The prince looked back at me as if he had heard the word for the first time. You doing volunteer activity? Yes, I felt a little bad without knowing why. The crown prince murmured wistfully. It's the most amazing thing I've ever heard from you. It's the basic skill of the noble family. As I clenched my teeth against his front wall, I asked back a step later, how the hell are you here then? I forgot because I was distracted by the devil, but Callisto's appearance was certainly out of the blue. When I looked at him again, I avoided his gaze without knowing why. On the news that the new nations are on the move, I was watching the Archina Islands and Trot End carefully. You'll watch carefully, so you were in the Trot End too. That's right, Callisto added a step later. Do you know how absurd I was to see you here all of a sudden? Thanks to you, we've found all these places. I've got a navy around the Archina Islands. And how the hell do we get out of here? I couldn't tell if he was going. The crown prince looked around the cave and shrugged. As I listened to him, I suddenly frowned. Did you follow me? What's with the I'm following? The crown prince jumped at my suspicious eyes. That was more suspicious than how did you get stuck in the same place as me? I'll kill them all. Where have you been? Because of the trap. The person that came with me also fell. That's when I asked a question full of doubts. Like a rapid-fire shot, the crown prince coughed loudly, and he rolled his new red pupil for a moment, as if he were looking for an excuse, and spat it out. It's a secret of the imperial family, I stammered in bewilderment. I won't let you know, you'll get hurt. What nonsense is that? More than that, princess, didn't you say we had to go save the kidnapped child? Suddenly Callisto pointed behind me. To do that we have to ride that leftover mare. We're running out of time. Then he passed me like a shot. I looked at the back of such a prince in a daze. What are you doing? I told you to hurry. When he arrived next to the dead body of a demon, he gestured quickly for me. That's weird. When I was suspicious, I stared at Callisto with an unquestioned eye, and I turned my steps after him. He was right in what he said. Either he followed me, or whatever the important thing right now is to save the children. The body of a heavy flat horse filled the passage without a break. As he said, it was unavoidable to step on a demon. Indeed, Callisto climbed easily with his injured hand. Just like man it was when I was just staring at how to follow it. Come, hold hands. In an instant he stood on top of the head of a demon, and suddenly bowed down. He reached out his hand to me. I stared at the hand and immediately held it together. At that moment, I realized that I no longer thought. I thought coldness would go away over me, but I'm surprised. Then Callisto pulled me up with great grip. I lost in thought, pulled up like a sheet of paper. When I opened my eyes, it had settled on the head of a demon. Careful, seeing me reeling, he hurriedly hugged me tightly. I opened my eyes wide as if to pop out on the chest of another hard man touching my forehead, and managed to come to my senses. Thank you, Your Highness. My heart was pounding with fright. Now I can go alone. When I was flustered out of his arms, the crown prince let me go without a word. The hand that had been caught by him was hot. I couldn't even think of choosing the window of the confirmation system or the favor that came to my mind because I was in a hurry to hide my hands behind my back. We quickly walked across a straight line of passage over the mare. How much would we have walked? Suddenly the dark field of vision brightened and there were as many as 4 branches. Geez, we're in trouble. The crown prince murmured a curse. It was also about time. I looked at the window with troubled eyes. System, you have earned Rayon's room as a reward. A square window came up in front of me. An arrow has sprung up. The figure pointing to one of the 4 branches of the road gave a flash of color. Your Highness, I think I know the way. You know? Yes, I can feel the child's magic signal. In fact, I don't feel anything like that at all. But the crown prince, who looked back at me with astonished eyes, turned his head up. Follow me. We hurried into the aisle at the far left as the arrow that only I could see pointed. The road that followed was very complicated and twisted. It seemed to have been deliberately made to stop the intruder. A new road has emerged constantly. Every time it was not for the arrow marks, the system would have been stranded. The crown prince followed me without much depth. In the middle of the enemy camp, I was constantly caught in a complicated mind. Walking in silence for a long time, I moved to the side where the arrow was pointing, but I couldn't stand it. So I opened my mouth first. Why don't you ask what about magic? To my question, he said, as if he had remembered what he had forgotten. So you're pretty good with magic too. In the crossbow and the magic of archaeology, it's getting more and more amazing. Nothing to worry about, princess, I don't have any prejudices in the wizard. He glanced down at me and made it insignificant, I blinking my eyes at him. Looking up, I carefully asked back what was really bothering me. Doubtful, don't you doubt? What doubt? I was suspected I may be in league with Layla. He blew his breath away as if he were dumbfounded. Why would you do such a useless thing? I pinched my mouth in embarrassment and asked again. What's the point of? Well, said the crown prince, nodding his head and saying, why would Eckhart's only princess, who has nothing to be afraid of in the world, be one of those crazy groups? It was me who was rather embarrassed by the tone that did not contain any doubt. I made up a reason why I stuttered while rolling my eyes. You actually trust that I'm not believer of Layla? Ha, you, the crown prince laughed at me without hesitation. I jagged my mouth. What, can't you believe it? Didn't you see Layla remnants on the eve of the hunting competition? Of course I did, reply with a sullen retort. Now, he turned his upper body towards me. Crazy guys who don't know what's right or wrong and just believe in their own beliefs. I see their eyes glisteningly upside down. He looked at me and tapped the corner of my eyes with his hand, then the hand pointed to my face. I'm not looking at you, fatly, with such rotten fishy eyes as you are. What do you mean, rotten fishy eyes? I walked a step away from him in disgust. The crown prince grins, and if you were a believer in Layla, you'd have recognized it first in the cave, a fellow of the ancient Layla clan who tried to carve a portal in the palace. I opened my eyes and I looked around. It was amazing that the remains I met in the cave were the ancient Layla clan. But what's even more surprising is that the crown prince also knows this rundown about the Layla tribe that Vinter had been working on. Did you know about Layla tribe? I asked him all comprehensively. The crown prince turned his head away from me and answered indifferently as he walked forward. You had no idea. If you knew, you wouldn't have said so casually that you would dig up artifacts. If I had been Layla's admirer, I would have tried to complete the portal at that moment somehow. I looked at him with a little dim eyes. Whether it's this amazing that he knows everything or it's a relief that he doesn't doubt me at all. Whether or not it is possible, even I could not understand my feelings now. In addition, how much do you value the water that those madmen remodeled? As he was walking along him with a complicated heart, the crown prince suddenly added with a cynical expression. When I went to the slaughter, they begged me not to touch only the underground lab, although they could kill themselves. When I went straight into the lab and I was just feeding the young children who had run out of mana. Oh, the children, what kind of madmen are they? I was astonished by the more brutal than I imagined by the believers of Layla. The prince continued to speak with a faint voice and sigh, perhaps because he had already seen the terrible images. How many humans did they kidnap, and how much effort did they put into creating a giant object that you had just killed? So if you were the remnant of the new kingdom, you would have killed all the evil creatures so senselessly. Senselessly, I was shocked by his ignorant remark. Why? You shot the crossbow at these evil creatures without hesitation on the eve of the festival. He laughed at me, stuttering in shock. I tried to contradict him in a fit of emotion, but I shut my mouth again. And after a long time I asked again with caution, what if I was to kill an ally to avoid doubt, someone who thinks I'm weird? Were they afraid that they were there? I couldn't stop whining about the crown prince. So what if I'm really Layla's remnants, and I'm acting at a high altitude? As I turned the corner, a new arrow came out. It was an arrow point that led to several passages. What would you do then? The crown prince stopped slowly and looked back at me. Well, then I can't help it. The white arrow pointed to one place, but I paused and looked at him. You'll magically destroy this fucking Inca empire, he said with a grin as if he were playing a pranks. I frowned at his behavior, as if he were waking up to a serious question. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding either. The truth is, if you're a real Layla clan and you're trying to destroy the Inca empire, I'll help you both materially and morally. What did you just say, Crown Prince? I was so stunned that I kept blowing up the wind in vainly. Why can't you? This country is rotten to the core. It's time to go down. He shrugged. When I become an emperor, the first thing to do is to cut off the heads of the royal family and the nobles, your highness. After that we'll scatter all their wealth to the hungry people. We're going to give it away, and then we're going to start a war with nothing left after. It's going to grow until this fucking country was blown to ashes, muttered with an unknown face, whether he was serious or joking. Then will our emperor run out of the grave in tears of blood? He laughed ferociously, suggesting that when he became emperor he would be dead for sure, no matter what. The figure was a little creepy. The plan was more specific than expected to be dismissed as a joke. As I stared at him in silence, he patted me on the shoulder a couple of times. So let the princess take over the imperial palace first before I painstakingly start a war. I don't care, it's really because it's okay. I opened my mouth that wouldn't fall and I answered back in a frightful way, unfortunately I'm not Layla's remnants. That's a pity. The conversation, which began with my suspicions, ended with a reminder of the crown prince's crazy side. Now where should we go? Callisto asked, glancing around the cave all over. Only then did I come to my senses and point toward the arrow. This way, lady. Then someone popped out of the left burrow. The familiar appearance of the rabbit mask startled me and shouted. I was about to call the fire piston, and suddenly realized that there was a crown prince next to me, and I managed to change it. Rain frequent in an urgent mind. A very familiar name popped out. Frequent. The crown prince was following me, and with this unpleasant look he jabbed the blank. Who is it? The sudden appearance of the crown prince made his eyes big and dark blue pupils visible through the cracks in his face. I am cried out in place of a vacant lot showing signs of difficulty. Well, he's the top volunteer information officer who came with me. He know how to use magic like myself. What's that weird mask you've turned around? You don't take it off right in front of the crown prince, it's profane. The crown prince groaned, showing his discomfort in his voice before he pulled his sword like a madman. I rushed to the front of Vinter. It's a custom from a country far east. They firmly believe that if you take it off, it's used for evil spirits. The crown prince frowned disapprovingly. Does a princess know anyone like that? There aren't as many companies as I thought that would arrange volunteer work in places where support is really needed. Like Trot and I see when I get back, I'll always have to. Back up. Callisto finally shook off my excuse and accepted it in a faint voice. I looked around the Vinter with an apologetic face. Let's do it to keep it secret. As I winked in meaning, it shook like a gin for Vinter. Soon, he said with a nod of his head, as if he had no choice. It's where rayon is when you pass through that barrel. You said you were a foreigner, but you speak quite well, right? The crown prince looked at the Vinter and ordered arrogantly. You said you were a magician, you take the lead. Vinter followed orders obeyingly. What's going on? Really? I followed and chewed my lower lip with anxiety. Isn't the crown prince aware? Is it? It was none of my business to find out that Vinter was the Marquis and the wizard. However, if crown prince caught coming all the way here with him, something very bad was likely to happen. Suddenly the crown prince stopped, realizing that he was standing still. I called him, Your Highness, aren't you coming? The crown prince, who stared at Vinter that first entered the aisle with dubious eyes, finally moved at my call. Princess, look at that, he whispered as he came towards me, suddenly death of his voice. Did I get caught? My heart was pounding. I tried to hide my shock. I asked with a quiet voice, What? He's barefoot. The crown prince pointed a finger at the feet of the Vinter. Isn't he possessed by an evil spirit? I don't know which country he's from, but you're not crazy enough to barefoot. The shoulder of the leading Vinter flinched. Even if the crown prince turned down the sound, he could hear it. I'm sorry. I turned away as if I didn't know as I mourned through Vinter that had become a demon-possessed maniac. We lost. As the last passage, the winding road seems to be cut off, and it goes on endlessly. At a time of constant delay, Vinter attempted teleport magic between cave and cave, but failed because the road was too complicated and did not know the exact location. We kept moving fast and fast. We're going to reach the Archina Islands. What a bunch of them. The crown prince murmured with a frown in the middle. I felt the same way. I was horrified by the precision of the men who made such a deep and complex cave under the island. I thought you were just an extra villain passing by until the eve of the hunting competition. I had made fool of them. The name Layla New Kingdom seemed sloppy, and it was because the system made it easier to defeat them. But in retrospect, I could never think it was sloppy. They were the ones who fought through ironclad censorship and defense to the depths of the imperial palace with mana. There's a helper among the high nobility. How far are their odds? I don't know if I did, but I felt scared again. At the same time, I couldn't shake off the sense of incompatibility that the story seemed to be intertwined with them. The closer I got to Rayon, the more mysterious anxiety eroded my body. We need to get out of this crazy game quickly before something happens. I thought again, looking at the red and purple guys walking in front of me. My goal is escape, that's all. It was one more time when the direction was reversed. Along the cave in the distance, someone's desperate screams echoed. The three of us who were startled and stopped walking soon shut up and walked quickly, regardless of the screaming. Soon there was a glimmer of light in the distance. The winding passage is finally over. Before the exit, the most advanced Vinter suddenly turned around. From here on, I'm afraid we need to use transparent magic. He quickly pulled out his cane from his arms and swung it toward us, and as if he were blessed, a burst of white powder came out and spilled over Callisto's body. I didn't feel anything special, Vinter said, a cautionary note, as if he had finished casting a spell. Unless you shout loudly, the noise is blocked to a certain extent, but don't show magic or mana. When overlapped transparency is lifted, then can we sneak up and kill them by force? The Crown Prince asked the same question I was about to ask. Vinter answered calmly. I don't know how long it's in there. Please refrain as much as you can until you know the exact location of the children. As if to understand, the Crown Prince lifted his head with no sincerity. It was the moment. Don't come, it's coming. A gruesome scream rang out from a place much closer than before. We made an eye contact and ran straight to the exit. Coming out of the dark and stuffy burrow, a surprisingly huge space appeared. An exquisite wall and pillar of white plaster and marble. It was a completely different scene from the dark cave that had been passed by. I've turned their base into ashes, and here's the only place I've got. The Crown Prince looked around and smiled with a fierce look. Goddess, at that moment the eyes of the people turned to the voice of several people. At the very end of the space were large statues and altars that made the temple fire. A slender figure dressed in a white robe and wearing a white mask stood on it. Dozens of humans with black robes on their faces were lying on their stomachs below. Please eat the leftovers as well. The one at the front of the fallen fellows crawled close to the altar. I know you're unfamiliar because you haven't fully recovered your memory yet. But for the greater good you have to accumulate strength. Food. I tilted my head. Because there was not much food on the altar, but what they call food. It was right after I learned that it wasn't a ceremony. Two black robes lying on their stomachs suddenly rose. And isn't he dragging something from behind the altar? Let go, let go, let go of me. It was a young stout man who was dragged out by the sound of a rough chain. As if he had been hiding, the man's face was limp with fear of balls. They dragged the man down the altar at once and knelt violently. Let go of me, the man rebelled harshly, but it was useless. A man wearing the only white robe that stood out among black robes slowly descended from the altar. I looked deeply at the white robes. He hesitated for a moment in front of a man who rebelled in fear, and soon after, reached out. Don't. As it approached, a scream similar to what I heard just before I arrived here rang out. Surprisingly, however, the man suddenly shut his mouth when the white lobes patted the earl oysters. All I could see from my side was my back, so I couldn't tell what he had done. When the man calmed down, a white robe soon lowered its head over it. The guy who saw in front of him was wearing a mask that showed his nose. Unlike the hesitant gesture earlier, red lips were seen enchantingly drawing lines. Woman. By the time I noticed it, the woman with her head down kissed the man slowly. What the hell are you doing? Why are you kissing him? All of a sudden I couldn't figure out what I was doing, so I glanced sideways at the Crown Prince and Vinter. They also seemed puzzled as to what was going on. Like me, it was a few seconds later that the situation reversed. The man who had been accepting the kiss of a woman in a white robe suddenly fluttered with a groan of anguish. The movement grew more and more intense, but neither the men who caught him nor the woman who kissed him did not budge. I was so surprised that I watched the scene with my breath stopped, but at that moment something unbelievable happened. The healthy body of a young man who was convulsing gradually reduced his volume, and shrank like a wind-free balloon in an instant. When the woman finally took her mouth off and took her breath in two pairs, only the loose clothing fluttered in front of her over the bone-in corpse. Just as the two black robes that he was holding on to threw away, they put the man, or the body. As soon as he reached the hard floor, the dried body was crushed and scattered in all directions. What happened? I breathed sharply. What the hell? Immoral! The Crown Prince uttered harsh curses. The same seemed to be true of Vinter and Callisto, who were shocked by the terrible scene. Bring me a mirror. The situation turned before I even realized what the hell was going on. The black robes who was urging you to take the lead in eating food got up. She gave orders for them. She seemed to have a higher position than the others who were lying on their stomachs, rose and brought them to the back of the statue. After a while, what they brought out were 6 children who had fainted and a large colorful box of chastity. Except for one, they put down the rest of them under the altar rayon. I recognized the lion's mask and my eyes were widened. It seems to be of great use because it has the most mana. I'll take out the rest of the mana in moderation and throw it into the mana's food. The man bowed his head to the white robe and made a terrible sound. At that moment there's a white square in front of me. System main quest: the whereabouts of the children who have disappeared. Pursue Rayon's whereabouts with the wizard. The quest is complete. System, you got plus 5% of Vinter and famous 50. Famous total 460. I checked the completed quest. I asked Vinter and Callisto urgently, hey, what do we do now? Too many. Besides that white guy, you shouldn't touch her. It seems like you're playing some kind of trick against it. The Crown Prince glared at the white lobes, frowning his brows. After a moment of thought he opened his mouth. Hey, a stranger, yes, I'll catch his eye for an opportunity so you can move the children. The prince, who spoke quickly, turned his head toward me. This time, princess, you sneak up and get that lion mask and then escape with the moving magic. Do you understand? The prince's voice was outspoken. Perhaps in that short time his strategy was perfect. The problem was me. Well, I can't use the mobile magic. What? The Crown Prince looked back at me as if he was puzzled by my words. You know how to use magic, don't you? But you can't use mobile magic. Well, you know. Xfoot, how can I tell you that I only use magic as the system tells me? It was a time when I hesitated because I couldn't think of an excuse to answer. That suddenly the empty space looked somewhere and spat. His eyes, visible through the crevice of the mask, were pitifully rigid. Me and the Crown Prince followed his gaze and turned their heads. Turning behind the altar, the white robe beckoned off the lid of the fancy box. Something floated up in the air in the box. They were sharp fist-sized pieces in every frost. Like debris that had been broken, the white robes arranged them in the air with light hand gestures. As the debris returned to its place, a blue light leaked from the finished part. You can't activate that, said Vinter in an urgent voice. Asked the Crown Prince, what's that? It's the oil used by the ancient Layla clan. Bring your opponent into the most hopeless situation and dig his mind out. Vince muttered as if he were confused. No matter how young he is, I wondered how he was brainwashing the firm spirit of the magicians. They're trying to use it on Rayon, aren't they? I understood his meaning and asked urgently. It was then. A sudden burst of blue light from the altar liturgica. Without a moment's hesitation, the Vinter ran forward, swinging its cane. Where are you going? I called him out of shock. From his back the intangible membrane was seen flowing down. It's because magic overlaps with transparency. The intruder, the black robes, were confused when they saw Vinter that appeared out of nowhere. You must not have left it yet. Protect the goddess. I'm going to pull the devil. Come on. When the guy who was advising next to the white robes gave the order, they didn't hold each other's arms. Stay here for a moment, Princess. Crown Prince hurried after the vacant lot. Well, Your Highness, I was left alone with no answer. As soon as the Crown Prince followed Vinter, a roaring sound rang out in the hall. I opened my eyes wide and turned my head. Light spewed out of Vinter, shouting out the spell. It was shot straight into pieces that the woman was matching. I don't know if she's almost finished with the broken artifact, but she's going to have a blue light in the air. She was emerging in a large flat form. It collided with the magic shot by Vinter. There was a gust of wind. There was a short and fierce confrontation, but after a while, with the sound of rupture, the blue light from the oils slowly faded. Soon the light was completely gone, and it returned to the dull gray of mirror. A mirror. It was very messy and dirty, but it was a section of the mirror that looked momentarily as the light went out. Instead of just turning off the light, Vinter continued to shoot magic lasers. The debris seemed to be trying to destroy the artifact again. But the attempt was soon overlooked because of the snake that's been running towards him. Just before the mouth, which had opened to a disgusting extent, tried to swallow the lower body of Vinter, the Crown Prince who had followed him managed to drop the sword on the forehead of the snake. Hey, a stranger, look at the situation. Do it as you go. Should I cover your ass? The Crown Prince exclaimed ferociously. Frowning, Vinter froze and answered urgently, we have to destroy it completely. That artifact has a negative effect on not only wizards but also ordinary people. If you're so worried, move the children away. The Crown Prince's words made sense, and Vince quickly killed Snake instead of insisting on it. Surely with the two men running wild, the villains didn't even tap. As expected, a man is a man. Seeing the number of demons declining sharply, I was inwardly relieved. Seeing that the main quest was no longer coming out, it seemed like the episode would be over soon. After saving the children, the Crown Prince quickly reached near the altar thanks to Vinter, which used magic to strike several balls at once. He cut off the men who took out the manure from their pockets without hesitation. As he asked Vinter when he cast his spell a moment ago, the prince's transparency is solved by force. Several people were killed in an instant in his unseen assassination too. There's another one who's been invisible. Sudden sprinkling of blood among themselves. Did he look very strange? They soon noticed that someone had been hiding. Protect goddess more mana. The men who were being cut off by the crown prince's sword quickly banded together to the main side of the altar at the order of their superiors. Some of them have taken out a shiny crystal ball as seen in the palace before. Some of them have black pockets held up and shouted an unknown spell. A heavy tremor rang out. I shut my ears with my hands in a tremendous roar. Looking ahead, I doubted my eyes. Crazy in terms of what has come out so far. 5 fully grown devil jumped out of their pockets and filled a large space. It was much bigger than the one I managed to defeat with the help of the crown prince earlier. Boom. Every time the monsters moved, the floor shook. The huge shadows fell all over and over again. The crown prince fixed the bloody knife and cursed that the same was true of the vacant lot, which faltered in an overwhelming size that was different from what it had been dealing with. Why is it getting harder and harder? Shouldn't it be over at this point? Standing on the corner, and not being able to do anything, I felt a sense of uneasiness. Unlike me, Vinter and Crown Prince quickly regained consciousness and began to fight the evil creatures silently. When Callisto cut off the legs of a demon, the ground poured out magic with a stick. However, the size was so big that it did not make much difference. The attacked demons jumped with excitement. It's hard to control, or there's an object that tries to trample on the new country. The Crown Prince drove his spirit into enticing the demons to attack them. Throw your rice at the devil. The black robes ordered. Oh no! I opened my eyes knowing what rice was. I began to run aimlessly toward the altar with the children. I wasn't sure if I could stop them without the power of the system, but I had to do anything while Vinter and the Crown Prince went through hell. But before I could get close to the altar, a black robe surrounded 2 children. Don't I clenched my teeth. Piratio. At that moment, Vinter, who had been struggling with a demon, quickly shouted the spell. 5 children hanging on the floor with white light disappeared. I stopped running. He turned around. He was hit by a tail wielded by a giant lizard monster in return, and then flew to the other wall and plunged. Slipping down to the floor, he cramped for a moment, and soon drooped, and I couldn't breathe and looked at it. Is he dead? What if he's dead? What's happening now has come as a realistic and unrealistic performance. Whenever everything I thought was part of the game felt like a real situation, I felt scared and crazy. I'm scared and I can't wait to get out of here, princess. It was none other than Callisto that awakened me, who had been in a state of panic, frozen stiff. Penelope Eckhart, the clear name that called me, came to my senses. He roamed the floor, avoiding the ball of 3 devil. Get a hold of yourself. If you act quickly when you're dragging your feet, you'll get away with it. I turned my head reflexively at the words on the altar, blocked by countless black robes. At the foot of the white robe, a small body in a lion's mask was still unconscious. He was lying on his back. I looked with shaky eyes at the Crown Prince, who struggled to deal with the devil alone, and said, "No one can see you can make it." He stabbed the flying tail and shouted again for me. I nodded madly at him, and soon got back to my legs. It took me times to get near the altar. The Crown Prince was right. None of the men noticed that I was going up and down the altar. Whether the invisible magic would be maintained even if Vinter was lost. The white robe covering its face with a mask embraces the blue-colored relics and looks somewhere. It was on the side of Callisto. He seemed to have lost his mind to invisible humans dealing with evil creatures. I stooped down under her ruler. After stopping at some distance, I reached out and held Rayon's hood tightly. From now on, it was the key for me to drag Rayon to the end of the altar. Took Rayon just a little bit towards me. Fortunately, neither it was white lobes, black lobes, and no one noticed. Okay, just a little bit like this. Then I took courage from him and led Rayon carefully to the end of the altar. However, it occurred to me that it would not be possible to do so at this pace. The Crown Prince was on the defensive. At this rate, even that will be Vinter and the new nations will accomplish what they were going to do with Rayon. I was thinking, will it just get caught and go wild? I was looking at the woman wearing a mask. It was then a faint light came into the relic. The woman was hugging. The blue light poured down on me. What? By the time I was looking at it in a state of confusion, I could see something rising in the relics. At the same time, the white robe sensed an abnormal status. The mirror, the woman looking down at the mirror, looked at me exactly like a flash. The blue eyes beyond the mask met face to face. It's X. I got a gut feeling that something was wrong. I realized the truth. It was the moment system main quest, the whereabouts of the children who have disappeared. Would you like to proceed with the quest? Compensation: all male leads favorability plus 5%, reputation 50, accept refuse, accept. I hit accept twice in a row. The letters were immediately changed. System shout out the magic spell Decina Reptium. The magic spell in front of me has never been more than welcome. What kind of order do you want me to attack? Unlike other times when I told you nothing was written, but I was not in a position to cover it. Decina. When I opened my mouth hurriedly, an unknown heat swelled under my neck. I clenched my teeth and pressed it down. And shouted with all my might, Decina Reptium. It's a lot more than ever. The vibrations and the roar shook the basement. A huge chunk of light round like a gym ball poured out like a bomb from all sides. They bounced off in all directions like rubber balls, smashing everything down and trampling on it. Light, scary vibrations, ear-splitting loud noises, glaring flashes that cannot be seen. When the roar finally died down, and most of the light sticks were gone, I was speechless at the sight that had been revealed, and between the rubble of the broken and crumbling columns, 5 giant lizards were all dead, spewing only smoke. Standing in the midst of the chaos, Crown Prince stared at me with a faint look. You, the chief who was standing next to the white robe, saw me and pointed a finger at me. Not only him, but the eyes of all the black robes standing in front of the altar were on me. He couldn't take it out by using magic, and the 2 famous paintings were released. How the hell did the ancient magic go away? The one who muttered in a trembling voice like he couldn't believe it exclaimed, as if nothing had happened. Hill that bitch Decina. I quietly mended the beginning of the order, haha. The men who were about to come to me took a sharp breath and stopped moving. Everyone had just seen with their own eyes how big the magic power I spell was. You'd better not move if you don't want to look like the snakes. I rolled up one corner of my mouth and laughed meanly. Then I held Rayon in my arms and raised himself proudly on his stomach. As if my warning had worked for sure, they were only flinching at my actions and never thought of coming. I still glanced at the white robe staring at me in silence with the relics in her hand. I said it was to destroy the spirit. You shouldn't see it. As consciously as possible, she slowly opened up the mouth, trying not to look at the woman's arms. It was when I had just come down from the altar out of the faint light that was spouting toward me. A white robe which had been staring at me without moving suddenly lifted up the mirror in his arms. The Assam, with a low-pitched voice, a blue glow came from inside the mirror. The light struck straight down on me. There was no time to spare. I hugged Rayon's head towards me and closed my eyes tightly, but even though I closed my eyes tightly and didn't see the artifact, the light penetrated in an instant. The view flashed blue. Numerous scenes passed through it, changed so fast that I couldn't tell exactly what they were pointing at all. I couldn't cover my eyes with my hands because I was hugging Rayon. I startled and backed away at the seemingly repeated welcome. Now, as if he had taken the chance, the leader shouted with remorse, "Princess!" The voice of the Crown Prince, who called me anxiously at a distance, was also heard by a slight difference. "Get a hold of yourself, you'll die." I tried to regain my reason in a dizzy hallucination. The magic spell came to mind by a narrow margin. I opened my mouth. The hot things were bubbling under the neck again. I don't know why, but for the second time it was very hard to spit out the spell. Heal her and take her away. I could feel them coming. I fought desperately with the rising heat, and finally magic spells popped out with the feeling of something pouring out of my mouth. Decina Reptium, a wretched cry resounded, and there was once again a deafening roar of tremors enough to sway the whole body. The blue light that had occupied my sight disappeared, and I was able to open my eyes with difficulty. I blinked several times to regain my greenish vision. When it was barely clear in front of me, there was another tremendous spectacle before me. What? A lot of black robes which had just been lumped around the altar were scattered all over the place as if a bomb had fallen. Most of them were bleeding and did not budge. It seemed to be dead before I could even grasp the situation. Something about it flashed through my eyes, screamed, and scattered a few of the remaining black robes, but it was for a while too. Then I was struck by a lump of Ahan light, and they flew like paper sheets of paper. It was a great destructive force. Oh my! I opened my mouth. Numerous balls were popping around the hall, which looked twice as big as when they killed the demon a little while ago. When I killed the demon and smashed a pillar was small. The blocks of light I made by reciting the spell were as if to destroy everything in this space. Fortunately or unlucky, the attack was not crazy for me at that time. A chunk of light flew into the open. It was on the altar where the white robes stood. A strong wind blew with a deafening roar. Strong energy burst out like an explosion. I, holding Reuniting, was pushed out of my hands near the altar. I don't know if there's any danger around her. It was fortunate that there were no remnants of the post by the time I managed to squeeze my leg and stopped being pushed out. Lady Goddess, cried someone as if he were shouting. Turning my head towards it, I suddenly opened my eyes wide. A white robe fell on the altar. Goddess, wake up! The silver lobes called to her like that. I jumped up close. I could see red water spreading over the lobes, which used to only be white without a speck. Whether she was hit head-on by a mass of light that flew in, the relics that the woman was holding were shattered around her. I unintentionally did what Vinter was trying to do. It was when I was staring at it with a puzzled look. It's a flash of light at my feet. It caught the eye. It was one of the pieces of a broken mirror. It felt like it was tinged out here when it was broken by the magic of a lump of light. It sparkled as if it wanted me to pick it up. I felt a sense of déjà vu. I bent down and picked it up with one hand at the same time. Another roar rang out. One of the still lingering blocks of light is stuck in the statue behind the altar. The statue and ceiling collapsed at once, and a stream of water began to shoot out of the gap. The salty and fishy smell spread. The cave was broken and seawater was invading. You must go, Goddess, whether she is still alive and not dead in the mess. The black robes have raised a woman who can't keep her body together. He took out the crystal ball with one hand and mumbled something. Then a blue light came out of the crystal ball and surrounded them. Instinctively I noticed that they were trying to escape. I have to kill them all here. It was as soon as I opened my mouth to shout the spell again, Dekina, I made eye contact with a woman who managed to come to her senses again. The woman wrapped her hand around her face, blood dripping as the mask broke. But the hood she was wearing was torn to pieces, revealing all the covering of the hair. I forgot to shout the spell and opened my eyes widely. At that moment I couldn't hear the wall falling down or the sea pouring in. Breathless, lovely pink hair fluttering in the strong wind, the blue eyes staring at me. Yvonne, I spewed out, but doubted what I was seeing. It doesn't make sense. I'm mistaken, but no matter how much she covered half of her face, I've already played the game, and I couldn't not know that I broke all the normal mode. A woman's appearance that perfectly matches the game illustration. The blue color surrounding them grew stronger and stronger. It was then Princess. Someone grabbed me roughly by the shoulder and turned around. Golden hair fluttered before my eyes. Hey, the only time he stopped breathing was when he burst out, "Well, Your Highness." I blazed. The Crown Prince, panting wildly. Callisto pulled Reuniting out of my arms and hugged him and said urgently, "What are you standing so absent-mindedly? We have to get out of here too." But there I looked around the altar in confusion. Shoot, the place was empty, with only a great deal of sea water pouring down. "Thanks to your magic pouring like a madwoman, the cave is falling apart. If you don't go out now, you'll be buried." The spirit of the horse seemed to return little by little. "What about Vinter?" I looked around and looked for Vinter. The Crown Prince answered by moving quickly. He came to his senses by the time he made a second magic attack. I ordered him to pick up the children and get out before you eat the cave. That wasn't a very nice thing to say, but I was greatly relieved. That was a relief. Before I knew it, the sea had risen to my ankles. We rushed through the passage and began to turn back the way we had come. But not long after, the cave suddenly shook like it was about to collapse. I shrieked and crouched. "Damn it, can't you control this fucking magic?" After shooting, the Crown Prince uttered harshly. I felt very unfair, who thought the magic of the system was so powerful, but I could not answer back because it was not me who ate the cave. The Crown Prince and I sped more speed into the cave. A few more rumblings, some more. Did he run like crazy? Which feels a little different from before. Began to approach every momentarily. Me and the Crown Prince looked back reflexively beyond the cave. The fluttering Sheikah far away was chasing us at a terrifying speed. It was none other than a huge wave. The Crown Prince and I screamed at the same time and ran for life. But the speed of the surging waves could not be overcome with human legs. X feet now, you're drowning. Route or calm, you crazy game. The last thought I had was, of course, a curse on the game maker. Just before the dark sea hit my body, my chest feels stuffy and my airway is blocked like someone's strangling me. I want to live, but I couldn't breathe properly. Save me. At that time I could feel someone holding my hand tightly. Soon after, hot and soft on the lips, I've got to feel a strong wind blew from him and pierced a tightly blocked airway. How many more times did the strange sense repeat itself? At one point I coughed violently, and opened my eyes vaguely. The salty sea water burst out like a fountain on my mouth. Fortunately I was still alive, haha, when I was breathing hard. Princess, your majesty, gold hair streaming down over the dark vision. His red eyes expanded big and soon fell into raptures. I'm glad you're alive. I was thinking about what I should tell the Duke about his obituary. Despite his exhausted expression, the Crown Prince smiled playfully. I sat up and sat down in a squatting position without answering. Apparently the cave was swept away by the falling and crashing waters of the bar, but it was on a quiet beach where waves came and I couldn't tell how much time had passed. What happened to us? We were left together in the cave, I wondered, but luckily that little boy woke up and shouted something. The Crown Prince answered in a gentle manner how we came to live. And we were moved to a small uninhabited island around Soleil. Rayon. I looked around excitedly at the thought of Rayon, which I had forgotten. A lion mask stretching out into a large ruler was seen on the sandy beach, which was not far away. My eyes grew bigger. Are you alright? Don't worry too much. I think he's been exhausted for a while because he's consumed a lot of mana. I was relieved by the prince's subsequent remark. At the same time, sorrow sprang up. I felt bad because I felt like he had consumed too much man and stamina in that small body for a day. With a worried look for Rayon, I looked back at the Crown Prince in a flurry of thought. What about the new Layla? How about their remnants? Hey, Callisto suddenly reached out and pointed out beyond the sea. I looked at the side where Crown Prince pointing at, but I could see nothing in the vast sea of Inca. With a puzzled look on my face, he went on, searching for the place he pointed to. Congratulations on breaking down an island. As if he were teasing, he clapped 2 or 3 times without sincerity. The underground burrow was broken and moved here, and not long after the whole island sank. What? I asked back with a puzzled look, as I did not understand as the Crown Prince dawdled in a tone of absurdity. By the way, I've never seen an island being buried in water before. Well then, I'll have to give you a prize when I get back to. In recognition of your contribution to wiping out the remnants of the Empire and destroying their base. He turned his head toward me, bursting into laughter. I think I've been working on wiping out the newcomers since last time. I think it would be better to give you the knighthood. What do you think? Are you kidding me? What do you mean teasing? I'm serious. He grinned with a look of no sincerity. What happened to the crazy system? I couldn't find a word for a while when I was told that my magic had eventually brought the island down and sunk. I did, but I didn't actually do it, but I took responsibility for it. I don't know how to express the subtle feeling that I have to talk about. It was when I was staring at the far side of the sea that had disappeared. With a sudden light in front of course system main quest, the whereabouts of the children who have disappeared. Save the hid abducted from the power of evil. The quest is complete. System as a reward, all men favorability plus 5%, fame plus 50, and ancient magic mirror sculpture. Famous total 510. I laughed dejectedly at the sudden rise of the system window. When I lowered my head and looked at my hand, I found all the pieces of relics I had picked up when I used magic. Thick piece of mirror no longer glitters. I didn't lose. It was a quest reward, so-called quest main quest. It was fortunate to have saved the children, but it was inevitable that this would happen. It was so hectic that I finally realized that this was part of the story. At the same time, I remembered the sight I had seen earlier. The white robe that disappeared with the blue light. You looked just like the heroine. Blazing pink straight hair and a blue-eyed girl who was looking right at me. When I recalled it again, my heart became stuffy as if it were clogged. No, it's just a similar person. It can't be. I denied what I saw, flirting wildly. How does an angelic normal mode hostess look like a rail line and axis of evil? You mean the same kind of clan? It was then. Are you sick? The Crown Prince glanced at me with red eyes, perhaps because I looked strange, suddenly flapping my head with a serious face. What are you so seriously thinking about? When I came to my senses at the sound, I looked at him for a moment, and spat it out with difficulty. Your Highness, do you happen to see the face of a white robe? Have you seen something? No, the cave is about to collapse. Where's the time to sit down? Looking at his face, the heart slowly returned to its original state, which was cringed by the answer without delay. I didn't know why I was so relieved. Only then did I burst out with a sigh. I'm sorry. What? Retorted the prince, puzzled by the contextless apology. All this was not what I did, but what the system told me to do. But it was not an indulgence. After hearing the island fall apart, I forced myself into my crowded head, and opened my mouth calmly. You have to ascend the throne in a state of impurity, and I have destroyed a part of the land. I'm sorry. It was part of maintaining his good feelings, but the prince laughed as if he was dumbfounded. Is the princess making fun of me now? What do you mean making fun of you? I mean it, I responded with a serious look on my face, and here I murmured a little weakly because I couldn't control my magic, and this is what happened. Thanks to you, we're not all going to see the camouflage, Callisto answered in a rambling voice. And how do you know if you're gonna leave that base, and they're not gonna kidnap the kids again and kill them? It's better to be gone now without having to deal with it. I looked at him with a little surprise. Unconsciously words popped out. Don't you doubt? I don't think I'll ever be able to get enough of my doubts, isn't there? Callisto frowned. Why is a man so crooked? That your highness has said to me, and I was shocked and lost in my thought, and I regained my reason. Still, how came I use such powerful magic you don't even know? He snapped off coldly. You make me repeat what I said in the cave. You wouldn't have been watching the snakes and Layla die with such a puzzled look. I have eyes too, princess, just don't say anything. I'll judge on my own. As I saw it, I looked up at him with my shaky eyes. My heart was pounding too much. Was it because I was relieved or because I wanted to hear it? Suddenly I felt like my eyes were burning with tears, which had been called a dry spell since the old days. If you're really grateful, at least kiss me. But the feelings of the name were shattered by the following words. What? The prince looked at me, stammering. He had the audacity to say back. Why, you know, kissing the hero who saved him from danger. In return, to be exact, I saved you from danger. Then I'll kiss you. I'll do it. I refuse. The prince murmured something small, pouting his brows as if dumbfounded. I looked back and asked him, but he only shrugged his shoulders as he stood up, following me. With a curious look in my eyes, I soon became interested in his words to myself. But now how do we get out of here? He said he called the evil spirit scene wizard before he fainted. So he'll be here soon. I still glanced sideways at Rayon, who had no movement, nodded. It was the moment there was a strong vibration sound somewhere. As he looked around in amazement, the crown prince exclaimed and took something out of his arms. The tiny crystal ball was glistening. Wait a minute, princess. He turned it away from me with a shocked face, and then it worked. Your highness, where are you? A loud voice rang out. I tilted my head. It was a familiar voice. You shouldn't have run out of the way during the operation meeting. Why did the wizards threaten you? The prince hurried to stop the crystal ball. He spoke to me in a hurry with a puzzled look. Princess, I'm sorry, I have to go first and say, can you go back? The royal family is summoned in case of emergency. There's magic on his feet that can be done. Began to be painted. As soon as his words were finished, a golden-colored magic crew began to be drawn beneath his feet. Oh my, I gotta call Cedric Porter. That fucking guy already triggered it. Cedric, he was the only aide to the crown prince. While shocked by the sudden breakup, the magic crew was almost complete. Your highness. I approached him. Be sure to heal the hem of my dress on his arm was so red that I couldn't help it. They may have poison in the teeth of a demon, so check it out as soon as you get there. You're talking like a bird. The crown prince smiled faintly at my rapid talk. He suddenly reached out to me and grabbed me in the face. Pungent sensation touched on the lips. The moist thing popped out and licked the lower lip. While I was blankly blinded by the situation, it fell off quickly as if he were stamping a seal. This is a kiss for you who saved me, princess. Well, see you soon. The crown prince grinned and talked proudly, and disappeared with the golden color without a moment. What is this crazy? I realized what the crown prince had done to me one step later and uttered abusive language. I wanted to give him a good account of what kind of brutality this is, but he was already gone. I raised my hand to cover my lips with the back of my hand. The momentary touch was moist. Damn you, I shouldn't have worried you. Maybe it's because I was too surprised. The chest thundered as if it would break through the bone to grind. My face went up in flames. It's because I'm in a bad mood. I decided to kiss his thief like that. In fact, I couldn't tell if he was really upset. All these violent feelings seemed unfamiliar. There was a cool breeze, but after a long time the heat was still up. It didn't cool off easily. As I tried to calm down by pressing my hand over my beating heart, I finally opened my eyes hard on the white sand beach where he had disappeared. And the moment I turned my head beyond the lion's mask, I encountered a round eye staring at me. Rayon. I was very embarrassed. It was hard to know when the child who had no movement woke up. By the time a dreary wind swept through us, Rayon suddenly yelled at me to raise his finger. He kissed her. I was shocked by the bright teasing that popped out, and soon shook my head like crazy. No, it's not like that. Yes, it's kissed, hey no. As soon as I was about to run to stop that absurd-mouthed lady, a low voice rang out from behind my back. I paused, stopped moving, and turned around in the sky. A barefoot man in a rabbit mask stood tall as if he had risen from the ground. They know you. I barely changed my words as I came up to shout Vinter reflexively. Because there was no prince, there was no need to call him that anymore. You didn't see anything like that with the crown prince, did you? He showed up at an exquisite timing. I looked at him with nervous eyes. But I couldn't tell because he was covering his face with a mask. It was then Master Rayon, who had been sitting on the white sand a little away, jumped up and ran. I'm sorry, actually Penelope told me not to go under the wall, but I was trying to show off my magic to the children, and Rayon's sullen voice revealed the truth of the incident. I was a little surprised at the remark. They're showing up today. I didn't expect to them. They kidnap all the kids. It may sound like an excuse, but I was also in a state of limbo. Lady, it is the door. When the words of the calmly throwing vacant lot were true when they were just entering the cave. In fact, I didn't believe half of it because as far as I'm concerned I've had a heavy blow to the back of my head. Put down the crying lion mask on the mask. He breathed a deep sigh as he watched it. All right. Are you hurt? Yes, I'm fine, as Rayon mumbled. The blue pupil headed toward me. This time, is Lady hurt? It's all right, I answered the truth with a nod. Then I asked the things that came to mind belatedly. Did you take the children home safely? Yes, are you? I was going to ask if you were okay, but I just shut my mouth. I couldn't say. It's okay if it's empty talk. Perhaps because he was struck by the tail of a demon. Red water had spread over the ragged edges of the robe. It looked much worse than the crown prince. It's too late. I'll stop taking you there. So when I seemed to have no intention of continuing, he reached out his hand and suggested. At first I couldn't refuse the tired voice. Okay, let's get back to work. Hurriedly took his hand. Soon a bright light wrapped the three of us. Your Grace, the Crown Prince's only aide Cedric Porter greeted Callisto, who had just been summoned to the Imperial Palace portal with a stunning face with a magic crew. Hey, the Crown Prince raised his hand to greet such an aide. Here Cedric bit his teeth to press down on the simmering filling. He was the only major army he had brought to the battlefield, but sometimes whenever he acting like a madman, I wanted to strangle him. Recently, intense meetings were held day after day to wipe out the Layla Ganzhans hiding in the Archina Islands and damaging the Empire. The Archina Islands, where they hid, had so many canyons and reefs along the main side, and the waves were rough that the warships could not easily access them. Moreover, their rebellion was stronger than expected, and they were often killed in a group trying to wipe out the mess. Thus the Crown Prince was looking for a way to access the ancient maps he acquired during the previous hunting competition. It was at the height of the meeting a red spot appeared on the map and started blinking. It was an island not marked on the map near it, not on the Archina Islands. Everyone was puzzled by the sudden redness, and suddenly the Crown Prince ran out like a madman, leaving his seat. And now I'm back. What the hell are you doing at Solenoid? What happened to the injury? Asked Cedric, who recounted the situation once again. Instead of answering, the Crown Prince wriggled his eyebrows. Have you already threatened the wizards? You must have threatened them. I'm just asking for confirmation to find the charges. The wizards, at Cedric's interrogation, said if you don't move the Crown Prince to the Solenoid right now, he's holding it, so I will make a fawn's tail for you. He said I had no choice but to do so, shaking his teeth. Cedric added coolly, thanks to you who ran out during the meeting. The staff has yet to leave the palace, and we are very angry. You have to excuse me for what I did when I was injured, so give me an ear pump. Roughly, the shit was that you were making a mess of it, and everybody was making a fuss about it, so you could just explain the situation for an excuse. The Crown Prince replied slyly, what are you doing? I'm here to wipe them out. Yes, your grace, by blood. No. Callisto, who was walking fast toward the Crown Prince's palace, suddenly stopped walking. He raised his chin with a strangely imposing face and gave a thunderclap. The reserve was with the princess. What? Cedric said, what's wrong with my ears, and passed it lightly. The Crown Prince moved on and continued his horse. Our prediction was right. They couldn't easily move from the Archina Islands to Trotan. So he's got a silver basin on the seabed nearby. You mean the basement of the foil? Yes, the depth and breadth of the oysters were enormous. Maybe it was the Archina Islands. Then send troops to Soleil first. No, you don't have to. They'll be quiet for a minute. Callisto blocked Cedric, who was trying to fix the operation quickly. What Cedric seems to be wondering. Callisto, who seemed to be lost in thought for a moment, suddenly burst into laughter. He's finally crazy, Cedric thought. Of course the Crown Prince has been crazy for a long time. But it's finally time to go home. The princess beat all those underground burrows up. The whole solenoid sank under the sea. The Crown Prince, who was laughing, moved it to a rather pleasant voice. Embarrassed by the sudden turn of conversation, Cedric soon noticed something and was astonished. Then was that red dot. The princess's location reproducing the relics of ancient Balta was very dangerous and reckless. Therefore the Crown Prince engraved the law so that no one but the princess could use it. I don't know how it was obtained, but it went smoothly thanks to Callisto's possession of a handful of her cut-off hair. However, in the process of engraving, Magistrate said he had a problem. The ancient map recognized Penelope as its owner, and shared it with the clone new map. I didn't know exactly what it meant at the time. Your Grace, isn't that a crime? The thoughts that spread out of control, asked Cedric with a serious face. Crime? The Crown Prince was angry. It was a mistake to the last degree. Is it a mistake that you know? As far as I've heard, you must have been told a farewell by the princess during the last hunting competition. Cedric has a sudden chill. I was startled by the entrapment. Turning away, the blood-red eyes were shining brightly. Has your work been a little idle lately? The Crown Prince struck Cedric on the shoulder a couple of times as if he were reaching out. Just hear and deliver what's going on between me and the princess, as I told you. I want you to do your job. Don't try to add words to other people's love affairs, all right? Yes, all right, Cedric answered painfully with the water in his eyes satisfied. The Crown Prince stopped the violence disguised as encouragement, and began to turn around and walk again. After that the whining of the load ensued, but strangely enough it was none the worse today. Callisto couldn't stop smiling and laughing without even realizing it. At first it was nothing more than teasing. It was funny to deceive myself with a lie that seemed to look out and lose sweat to make up for it. I often thought about what she would reply and looking forward to seeing her again. It was damn good and life was pretty good. The weak interest was not extinguished even after the hunting competition. Rather, she's the one who's disgusted with herself. The curiosity about it grew even more. After the Marquis of Ellen, I was not very angry when there was an absurd rumor that I was talking about princesses, because I didn't have enough of a blow to the old man. I was amazed by myself. When she acted awkwardly with the makeup on, I thought it was trivial and cute. I thought she was just a dumb and arrogant commoner. The tiny lips, which were cursing while looking at me, kept growling before my eyes, so I unwittingly said, "By the way, Your Highness." Suddenly at Cedric's call, Callisto awoke from deep thought. "What? Why have you been fiddling with your lips so much since a long time ago? Are you afraid to hurt your lips?" Actually, what I wanted to say was, "Why are you stuttering your lips like that?" But because his life was a waste, Cedric managed to swallow his words as if he didn't know that the Crown Prince blinked. I was not very interested in reason, as I spent years in a battlefield where blood and flesh were popping up. I thought that my greed and sexual desire were all dead, and only hatred and murder were left. But at this moment in his head it was Penelope Icart's face that occupied. I kissed her, and she was round like a rabbit. Blue-green eyes, embarrassed, and puffed red lips. The princess' face revealed in the moonlight a little. Pretty, yes, Cedric bit back at the solitary chatter. The Crown Prince glances sideways at such a subordinate. He laughed as if he were doing it. There's such a thing. You've never been in a relationship in your life, and you don't know it anyway. No one has ever done it. Callisto laughed cheerfully, leaving behind the angry voice of his subordinate. When we opened our eyes, we stood in the corner of the human sparse alley at Hamilton Street where we first started. Looking at the street stained with black darkness, I sighed and came. I hope no one noticed there was a story left to wrap up with the empty space. But it was not a good situation. He and I needed treatment, and rest. It's all. I gave them a short glimpse. I'll get going. Are you going, Penelope? Rayon asked me, visibly sullenly. I'll see you next time when I get a chance. I smiled lightly, and then turned to the vacant lot. Thank you for the shoes. I took off the shoes he had worn me. He put out magic on the shoes so I didn't get wet or dirty even though I fell into the sea. Therefore it was meaningless to wash it and return it. I don't want to meet again because I'm returning the shoes. It didn't matter if I was barefoot because it was soon from here to the mansion. Judging so, I turned away from him without hesitation. It was a moment when I took a few steps. Wait a minute, the urgent voice clung to me. I hesitated and turned my head slightly. Wait a moment, lady. Why, Vinter spat out at Rayon without answering me. Rayon, you go back first. Yes, the teacher's words are heavenly, but the lion's mask answered obediently. After a while, a small new model was bought with the sound of a paratio and a cry for a spell as Rayon went. Vinter bowed down and lifted the shoes I had taken off and trudging along, sticking it out at my feet. Please keep your shoes on, Mansion, I'll take you inside. It's all right, I flatly refused. I think your treatment seems to be more urgent. It doesn't matter if you just have 7 children like this. A little while ago I looked at the main movement with the magic of maximizing hearing, and some generals were circling around the mansion. Nothing. I think I'm looking for a lady. What I thought he was literally saying, I'm terribly disappointed. Did they catch me, you crazy? I asked the rabbit mask hard with my shaking pupils like an earthquake. What time is it now? It's a little past 10, I sighed with a sigh. I left at 10 a.m. and came back after 10 p.m. to hell. Is it all a pass because it hasn't passed the day? I turned the positive circuit with tears in my eyes. When Vinter saw me like that, he reached out his hand and urged me again. You're late, so please allow me to take you to your room safely. If the knights are circling around the mansion, they will sneak into the hole anyway, and it will be long gone. I wore the shoes that the empty space had put out again and answered with a gloomy face. Please do me a favor. A moment later the white light occupied my eyes, and when I opened my eyes again, a familiar space unfolded. It was my room. My God, what! Emily was surprised to see me suddenly appearing in the middle of the room. Miss Penelope, Emily, what the hell? Why are you here now? Who is this man? When she saw a giant in a rabbit mask, she was startled and pulled me in. I asked in a hurry instead of explaining the glade. Did anything happen when I was not here by any chance? Emily's muddle about the facts. That's the butler came in the evening and knew you weren't there. What, the butler? I told him you was sick, but he said he had an urgent message. I grabbed my head. Of all things, the Duke knew it was a disaster for me. She tried to comfort me by looking at me frowning. Well, I'm sure he'll be here any minute. I managed to stop him from telling the Duke right away. But the butler was already secretly looking for you by releasing someone. If I hadn't come back today, it would have been only a matter of time before the whole world known. Hey, I decided to use extreme measures. I'd like to leave some requests. What? Vinter, manipulate the memory of all human beings belonging to the Duke. I've never been out. Emily took a shallow breath in my words. The blue pupil, who looked at me calmly asking for favors, shook once. Is that maid included? He asked in a dark voice. Yes, Lady Emily looked back at me with a shocked face at my answer without hesitation. But I retorted coolly, sorry Emily, there's nothing special about a complete crime. I still didn't believe anyone in the Duchess. After staring at me with no expression for a while, Vinter slowly pulled out his cane. Ram Branica, oh miss, how could even I be? Attempt. The terminal of the empty space, which was chanting magic spells, resounded heavily. Emily, who was expressing her disappointment with her betrayed eyes, suddenly fell to the floor with a pulp sound. I looked at it and asked, frowning, what's the big deal? As I told you before, the magic of the tube in memory has a subcrop that falls into a deep sleep. A sigh of relief came out. Vinter added, the magic was successful, and everyone in the mansion fell asleep. Don't worry, after waking up, there will be nothing more than losing your memory. I nodded still and opened my mouth. What should I pay for the request? Vinter was silent on my words, and the answer that came after a long time, I won't take it. Why? Lady came home late today because of my great responsibility. You can't trust me anymore. He seemed to hesitate for a while, then recited it calmly, the termination of the contract. I'll send you a letter as soon as possible. The words gave me a dejected laugh. You must still know my mistake. It was unpleasant and irritating enough to cause a rail line or not, to be suspected and be subjected to a rough time, but is it because it's a series of shocking things? I wasn't as mad at him as I thought. Even he looked tired in a rational way. Vinter's intentions were justified. He's been running against Layla for a long time, and I'm sure my behavior, driven by the system, is very suspicious. But have they seen it? The appearance of the white robe I saw last came to mind. I was caught off guard, denying that I was mistaken, that it was just a similar appearance. Circumstances have shown that Vinter already encountered a real princess who was living as a poor commoner while doing volunteer work. If very much the hostess is really the centerpiece of the pack, trying to kidnap the children and get rid of the wizards. It was an unknown thing to deceive the vacant lot and use him to do what he was to be done. As soon as I got there, I suddenly got goosebumps on the back of my head. You by any chance? I suddenly opened my mouth and immediately shut up. He suspected me of being a Layla remnants. There was no need to start a fire without knowing whether the suspicion had been terminated. Even if the hostess did, it was after Penelope's coming-of-age ceremony that she appeared in earnest. After I escape, it's not my job. I suddenly stopped talking and shook my head toward the rabbit mask looking at me with strange eyes. Nothing more than that, just keep the contract. In my words, the blue-eyed pupils expanded greatly. He showed signs of confusion. Why, well, it's funny to break the contract you've already made because I don't trust your public ability. The point of time for the escape. It was also hard to find a new top that was as capable and heavy-mouthed as Vinter. He stared at me with a look of unknown emotion. It was easy to notice that it was a mixture of faint expectations. However, I hope you don't have any more work to do besides the public sector. I cut it off like a knife. I don't think I can be as good as usual with the terms of the contract you've put forward. At my smiling face, the pupils of the vacant lot began to shake endlessly. Lady, I see what you doubt, what you worry about, and the cause that has become younger on your shoulders. My reputation and rumors haven't stopped, and I've been very suspicious of using magic. But you shouldn't be deceiving people with bullshit like interest. There was more vivid emotion in his eyes than ever before. In my words, it was pain and remorse. Above his head, the purple favor also blinked slowly at the gauge bar. I looked at it without any excitement. I wasn't deceiving, he spouted out in a nearly squeezed voice. It wasn't just for the doubt and confirmation that lady was interested. It's just that I'm suspicious. It wasn't. Vinter repeated the same thing within a slant voice. His faltering appearance seemed precarious, on the one hand pathetic. I felt sorry for him, who had the belief that he should continue the fight with difficulty while being cursed by Layla and ostracized by people. But understanding and my feelings were separate. Well, I don't care if I'm more suspicious. Doubt interests you all. Do it yourself. Lady, I'm telling you not to use me for your cause anymore. Lady, just once, one more time for me. I blocked the blank space that called me in a pleading voice and gave notice of coldness. Now go back and don't contact me until I find it first. Vinter went back hurriedly as if he had been kicked out with the shoes I handed him. I thought it was the end of all contacts with him. However, the moment I took off my clothes for washing, I felt the texture of the cold metal on the collarbone. Damn, with my head down I frowned and spat out a short curse. Vinter's necklace remains to be given to the hostess, so I should have given you the same shoes. With this feeling, I wanted to do everything in writing with Vinter. However, since ancient artifacts cannot be recklessly passed away, it means that we must meet again at least once. I sighed irritably, taking off my necklace and putting it in my desk drawer. I took out a piece of broken mirror that I had put in a small pocket inside my dress and put it down beside me. As I casually looked down at the drawer, there were quite a lot of things I got for a new game reward. I felt strange because it seemed like only junk that didn't even use anything was getting bigger. Looking down at it with a strange look, I soon closed the drawer. What was your favorite part of this video? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon for updates.